The power of ideation. So this is a huge tool that people often overlook in the workplace, and it's something that we all have access to, and it can just give us that next level of thinking. So for those of you that haven't met me before or don't know who I am or what I do, I've been business coaching for over a decade now, and I specialise in business planning. And ideation is an amazing part of business planning. And I recently published my book on business planning last year. So I'm quite passionate about the planning process. And I do motivational speaking sometimes, and also have been a triathlete, which again, there is much planning and much ideation needed in the planning process for any sporting event or any goal. And lastly, for those of you that know me, I've been happily married for over 30 years. So commitment and looking at ideation in relation to relationships is also a huge tool to use in all relationships. So let's get started. So first of all, what is ideation? What is it? Have you ever thought about ideation before? Is that something that you look at very much? So I'm excited about this because it's referring to the literal action of brain forming ideas. Basically, it's a process where you generate ideas and solutions through creative techniques like sketching, like prototyping, like brainstorming. In other words, ideation, basically, it refers to the process of developing and conveying prescriptive ideas to others, typically in a business setting. Those involved in the ideation process can be anyone from the people at the front line through to all the way up to CEOs, customers, stakeholders. And some of you may have experienced being called up by one of those marketing companies that say, oh, I'll give you $100 to come and have a discussion about this topic. That's ideation. They're getting ideas from customers or potential customers about things that are totally random outside the normal realm of thinking within that organization. So basically, ideation works to uncover thoughts from past or present experience, or knowledge from external influences, opinions, principles. The more diverse the people are in the ideation process, the better the actual quality of the outcome of that process is. So when we look at ideation, it's actually part of a bigger process. You may have heard of the process of design thinking. So the design thinking process has ideation as the third step of it. But I'm just going to focus predominantly on ideation today, but I will give you an insight into what those steps are. So when we look at this, what is actually design thinking then? If ideation is part of design thinking, what is it? Basically, if you look at someone like Google or Apple or Airbnb, any of these big ones, these heavyweights, they've been using design thinking process to gain status quo and to become a driving force in the business world. They use design thinking all the time, and that's why they're so innovative. That's why they're so out the box, really. It involves 5 stages. The first stage is to emphasize. The first stage is to empathize, and I'm going to go into them in more detail. So this is empathize with the consumer, the people who are involved in whatever it is. So we're looking from their point of view. The next stage is to look at defining. So defining what is the challenge, what is the problem, what is the goal, what are we going to do? Then the next one is to ideate, or this is where we're looking at ideation. Then we go to prototype. So it's a prototype of whatever it might be, a system, a product, a formula. And then the last one is test phase, to test, how is this going to work or not? So what we use this for, so design thinking, it's a process that teams use to understand users, to challenge current assumptions, to redefine problems, and also to create solutions and prototypes and to test those solutions. So fascinating, when we look at this and think, small businesses, how often do they use this process of empathizing, with their consumer, defining what the problem is, going through and ideating what that perfect world is, and then looking at what models are going to work to fix that problem and test them. They don't do that. And that's why these big giants like your Apples, your Googles, your Ubers, these sort of organizations are so innovative, because this process is part of their way of doing things. So when we look at this, we say, why is this kind of thinking so important? So the reason it's important is because we're looking at saying, okay, how can we embrace a different design of thinking? So if we're looking at architectures, we're looking at any field of professional, there needs to be a way to design a different way of doing things. So what this will do, it will help address human needs, and it will push innovation. So we're always looking at what are the needs, but what's the innovation? How can we innovate differently? Ideation, it also helps teams to gain a deeper understanding of the design principles around social psychology. So what their user experience and what people are thinking. Also, it gives them that real huge awareness of technology, because if they're doing all this research, they find out, well, what technologies are out there, what's available to us. And also it's giving them an insight into society and their tribe and, who they're actually dealing with. So it's a really important process. It is very, very underutilized. So when we look at these 5 stages, the first stage that I mentioned. So this is the first stage of design thinking. This is the little secret. I'm going to change glasses here. This is the little secret that your big organizations use. So first stage is to empathize. So we're looking at saying this allows each participant to gain an understanding of the problem that they're trying to solve, and looking at how this is going to actually affect its user, and looking at putting assumptions aside, what you already feel is true, and saying, let's have an insight into the user and what are the user's needs. So we're really stepping into the shoes of the user or the consumer or your client, and really trying to empathize with, what's happening with them. How are they feeling? What are our assumptions here that we are having, and how do we, get rid of those assumptions and really have an understanding of, what's going on for them in this experience, this user experience. So that's the first stage, to empathize and really understand our user. The next stage is to define. So this is stage 2 of the design thinking process. So let's really define, what is the problem? Once you've collected all the observations and you've collected all the data and you've got lots of information about your user, you've stepped into their shoes and said, this is what they like, this is what they do, these are their problems. And you might have used one of those companies that I said, those market research companies, or you might have done market research yourself. Sometimes, when I've been out in the shops, people have come up and asked me questions about a particular topic, and that's, what they're doing. They're trying to empathize with whatever it is that they're trying to find out information about from a human perspective. So in this define stage, we're looking at defining what is the problem. Let's get to the core of what the problem is. So, Albert Einstein says, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. So we really need to understand what is the problem and really get that defined. What's that problem that my user has from the information that I have researched? And also, how is that actually affecting them? So one of the tools that people use, and it's a way of getting outside our normal thinking, the Mad Lib formula for problem solving. And this is, kids have this a lot. This is when we say, we have a sentence and we've got lines where we fill in the blanks. That's the Mad Lib formula. So one way to help articulate a problem is by using this formula and saying, our user needs blank line because of blank line. And then this way, what we're doing is we're leaving it open to many different people's perspective. So with the Mad Lib formula, things that we could use to actually enhance the data that we're collecting about, finding out what is this problem, how do we get deeper understanding of this problem, is we look at saying the how might we question, and use the Mad Lib formula statement to create questions that begin with how might we, and you get a bunch of people to say, look, 5 questions with how might we solve X, and that's the line, that's the Mad Lib formula for X. So then we create 5 to 10 questions for each Mad Lib statement and then go through the list, generating lots and lots of different ideas. So you get 5 people saying, okay, how might we, solve this for this, or how might we, leverage this by this. So we're just doing lots of different ideas and lots of different blank spaces to have many different creative ways that sentence or ideas could come out from that. So it's about no question is wrong, nothing is wrong, just bring out lots and lots of ideas. So this is a great tool to use, this how might we question, in combination with the Mad Lib statement with lots of lines, is a great question to put to the group when you've got a problem. So say, for example, if you were talking about a service business and you might say to the service team, how might we reduce the, waiting time, or reduce the service time, or reduce the completion of order or get back time by X. And so everyone has to fill that out 5 times. So then each person, so then we've got 5 people, each person has to fill out the same sentence 5 times. You're not going to get 5 different answers. Everyone has to do a different answer. So then we come up with all these different ways, and all these different ideas that different people have said, hey, we might be able to do it this way, or we might be able to do it this way. So great creative tool to use for getting the ideas from the team. So step 3 in the design process is ideate. This is where all the ideas are really starting to percolate and generate, because the process before, we were just starting to get blanks and put lots of words. So this is a big part of this, is where you get in this headspace where you've really defined what the problem, but now we're starting to identify some solutions. A big part of this ideation part is brainstorming. So a great, a lot of people have done brainstorming before, but this is really getting everyone into the headspace of now we're going to solve the problem with all of the data we've got. So we've got all of the data of the problem, we've got all the what if ideas, and then now we're starting to look at, okay, let's look at ideas for solutions. So brainstorming is often where people start, and you know, in a controlled situation, in a free thinking environment, lots and lots of collaborative ideas can be put together. It's best with brainstorming to have a facilitator. I would always recommend a facilitator. I'd also have some rules in place so that people know what the boundaries are. And also another important thing to note is I would make sure that it's judgment free. So that way people's creative thinking and the brainstorming is all about looking at solving the problem that you've defined for the user that you've defined, so that we're really very focused on what we're doing this brainstorming for and what the rules are and who's facilitating it and how long it's going to be. So, you know, an example, you know, I've done workshops with people where we've said, you know, if we are to be #1 in our industry, what top 3 things have to change? And, you know, it's nice and clear and it's nice and specific, so that then people have their post-it notes and can write down what they want to write down, what they think needs to change, and then we put them up in the different areas. And people come up with all different ideas. But it just needs to be very clear on what we're going to actually focus for that particular brainstorming session, because brainstorming is a great tool that's been, you know, used many times for different things. So one of the things that need to be clear is also to start with a brief. So before your session, there needs to be a brief. We want to have everyone on the same page. So I would say share the data that you've got so far. So if you've gone and found some data on your users or your clients, whatever that data may be, or the insights that you've found, and also the data that you've collected on what is the biggest problem that you're going to solve. Is it turnaround time in clients? Is it, you know, the time we get back to them? Is it our systems are too repetitive? We need to streamline our systems because we're not getting back to people quicker. There's too much double handling, whatever it is. We need to know what the problem is and what insights we've found about that problem in those other processes. Also, consider writing your question or your problem on a whiteboard or something where everybody can hear, where everybody can see it, so that when you're doing the brainstorming, everyone can see what is that key question that we're actually looking at answering here in this brainstorming session. So there's that constant focus. So just have that as the focus of the session. It will really help keep them back to, okay, is this what we're addressing? Is this what we're addressing? And it will make a huge difference. Embrace differences as well. Understand that everybody has different ways of thinking, and some people are visual. If you've got a team, it would be interesting to know, you know, are they visual learners or are they auditory or kinesthetic? So everyone has different ways that, of actually thinking and also of learning as well. Some people use the internet, others don't want distractions. Some people want quiet, some people prefer chaos. So before you actually start a brainstorming session, be mindful that each person does have their own method, and you may need supplies to set up before this session. So a large whiteboard, post-it notes, pens, etc. Another tool that I use that is very useful in doing this process is understanding the disc profiles of all the team that you're actually going to work with, because some people have different motivators, and some people have different behaviours and different ways of interacting with people. Some are more dominant, some are more influencers, some are more analytical and more attention to detail. Some are a lot slower and a lot stabler than others, and want to spend more time soaking things in. So if we understand the disc profiles of the people that we've got in this team that we're doing this ideation process with, it means that we can really enhance everybody's skills and so that we can actually gain more insight from the team by embracing who's good at different parts and actually using that. So understand they're all different and they have different ways of interacting and learning. The other is stupid questions. You know, when we're brainstorming, it's important, and I've seen some people put it on the door, leave your ego at the door. There's no ego involved in brainstorming. You know, the obvious isn't always obvious. I'm not sure if any of you have seen, there is a YouTube about how the internet was created, and it's a YouTube video of how two ideas are often joined together to make one amazing idea, and this is how the internet was created. With two different ideas, two different problems, two different concepts that came together, and so it's not always obvious. The obvious is not always obvious. There are many common beliefs or understandings that we don't question due to familiarity for us. So when we ask you stupid questions, you know, sometimes we're too scared to, because we don't want people to judge us. But, you know, it's really important to be open to saying, there are no stupid questions in this room. There are none. You know, if we look at saying, let's get rid of our current beliefs, let's get rid of our current assumptions, let's question the status quo, let's gain perspective from other places, let's reformulate our beliefs, and put ourselves into a space where we're more open. So having that preset qualification that we can all ask you stupid questions, and it's totally okay to ask stupid questions, and they're actually encouraged, because we have no idea where these questions will lead us. So bring them on, they're important. So also in relation to that as well, the stupid question, in relation to that, aim for quantity, and that's why stupid questions are great. Aim for quantity, because quantity breeds quality. So the more data you get out, the more ideas, the more thinking, the more jigsaw pieces that we've got to create solutions and ideas for the challenges that we have. So let this be the time to get all the ideas on the table, and then you can sift them and sort them. So make sure that the essence or the understanding of the process is that we want great quantity of ideas, and that breeds a great quality, because we have much more to work with. So that way it's going to be deeper and enricher, much more enriched experience and quality of data. The other one here, and I reckon this is a great thing to do at least probably once a year with your team, is to do a really detailed SWOT analysis. This tactic, it's an easy way to break down an issue into 4 segments that can really help the team think a lot more deeply. So we look at your strengths, we look at your weaknesses, and your opportunities and your threats. So some people often say, can a strength be a weakness as well? Yes, sure it can. So, you know, a strength for an organisation might be that, you know, they are, a small team, so they're very transparent with their communication and knowing what's going on with their different clients. That could also be a weakness, because they're such a small team and it's hard to service really big clients. So having an understanding what your weaknesses are is a great opportunity to say, how can we mitigate this weakness? You know, what are we doing to currently mitigate it? And this is where we can get that different way of thinking and creative ideas coming out. Well, what can we do to mitigate this weakness? And then what opportunities do we currently have? And so often with business owners, they're looking at the past and looking at what's happened. whereas this is all about looking at opportunities for the future. So what opportunities are there for us in the future here? It might be looking at different fields of different industries and things like this. And the last one here is what are the threats that we are actually facing at this time? And again, what do we have available to us to mitigate these threats? Have we got any actions that come out of doing this SWOT analysis so that the whole team is actually working on mitigating our weaknesses, mitigating our threats, and also capitalizing on our strengths and our opportunities? Because this is all part of our ideation process with developing products, developing better processes, developing maybe a marketing piece or a marketing plan. It's all part of that. The more understanding we have of our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, the easier and the clearer it will be for us to draw our roadmap of how we're going to improve, or to create our marketing plan, or create a new ideal avatar of a client, it might, whatever it might be. So try doing this SWOT process in a small group, and often it's a great idea to do them separately, so that then we join the ideas together. And what did you come up with in your SWOT, and what did you come up with? And then making sure at the end of it that people are assigned any actions that are actually coming out of that, because we want, if we've got some actions to mitigate something, we want them to follow through with them. They're really important to follow through with them. And if there's some good ideas, there's no point in having them if we're not actually actioning them. So another way to encourage building ideas is to piggyback ideas. Encourage building on one another's ideas. This process of association, it allows new ideas to be triggered. As a way to spark piggybacking, try disencouraging the word but and replace it with the word and. So if one person is saying, oh, we could do this, process online, and someone else says, but, and we just say, no, we're going to get rid of that word, and we could allow for an e-commerce site, or we could allow for a bot on here, or whatever it may be. So in this process of ideation, in this brainstorming process, this design phase that we're going through, piggybacking is a fabulous way, because, as I said, that YouTube that I mentioned about how it explains how the internet came about, that was from two ideas. They piggybacked them together. That's what they did. So if we're looking at one idea, maybe, try looking at pairing different ones together and seeing how many can be paired together, how many different ideas affect this idea if we piggyback that idea. And take out the word but altogether and just do and for all of these different ideas that we have. Makes a massive difference. And generally, creativity does come from more than one idea, and it does come from more than one place. So this piggybacking is exactly that. It's saying creativity begins with multiple ideas from multiple places. So another great tool is visuals. Visuals are huge. So diagrams, photographs, any imagery about the topic that can spark ideas is very, very useful. Often I've seen people write processes or have a framework for people to plant their ideas, but by using the visuals, they can be very, very, very powerful. And, I remember reading a book once that when I think of visuals, how powerful a visual can be, I think it was maybe in the Rockefeller Habits book that I read it, and it was about, I think it was Henry Ford's factory, if I remember. Anyway, I could be wrong, but the point is the shift was finishing work and they wrote a number, I think it was 7 or something like that, in chalk on the ground. So it's a visual. So just one number they wrote in the ground on chalk, where people would clock in, and the guys going into the new shift at the handover said, oh, you know, what does this mean, this number of chalk? And he said, this was our production that we achieved today. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the team, the new shift that took over, all they wanted to do was up that number. That's all they wanted to do. So that one visual created a spark of energy to look at saying, how can we improve this? And this happened with this night shift and day shift for days. And the production ended up doubling because of this one visual where someone just decided to write in chalk on the ground what the production was for the day. So how many visuals are you using and in your workplace that could potentially create more ideas? Another visual that I often use is just the little disc for the personality profiling, you know, dominant person, influencer person, steady person, compliant person. Most people are dominant in one of these 4 areas. Having the little chart there on the desk, so that when you're on the phone to somebody, you're on the phone to a client, just that little visual clue gives you ideas of, is this person really direct? Okay, the theory is talk to someone how they'd like to be talked to. So, okay, I need to be short and direct. Or are they really friendly and talking about their dog and their weekend and the kids? Right, they're a real influencer person. I need to talk to them like that. So that one little visual has totally changed the ideas and the creativity for that conversation to make it a much, much more powerful conversation. Another one, you know, that often people use is the little sign, you know, are you above or below the line today? You know, taking ownership, accountability, and making sure that people have that front of mind, so that if they're below the line and are blaming and denial and excuses, that they realise that they need to get up above the line. So if we're going to look at creating more ideas in the workplace, and if we're in a creative brainstorming phase where we're going through this design process, we need to have visuals as well. What visuals will spark ideas for your team that you need to have? And then that way it draws out lots of different ideas, especially if you've got a visual learner, especially. It might be creating a vision board about, you know, who your ideal avatar is, or what your business looks like in 5 years' time. It might be that, you know, whatever is going to spark ideas for your team. So the other one is when we're looking at this design and this ideation process, prepare for roadblocks. Make sure you're quite open for any kind of roadblocks that may come up. So activities that get the creative juices flowing are great to have on hand, so that if people get to a roadblock or writer's block, you know, as someone who knows what it's like to have writer's block, if you've got a team that are just at a, we're at a blank, okay, great. Let's go for this little activity to get creative juices flowing. You know, there's lots of different little brainstorming or a little team building or creative idea building little exercises that you could do, that you could find on the internet. One, you know, that some people have used before, get people to, you know, take 10 minutes and list, you know, 10 different ways that the world, how different the world would be if metal was like rubber. So just fun, just getting their brain starting to think differently. You know, other ones where you know, have to build, you know, certain towers with straws and things like this. So just something to snap their brain out into a different tangent to get the juices flowing again, so that if they've gotten that roadblock or that cul-de-sac or whatever it is, or block, we want to change it. So we've got to do something to circuit break it. That's the word I was looking for. So have those on hand if that happens. We also have to step outside of our typical mindset. Sometimes we all fall into the trap of sticking to familiar patterns and recipes for problem solving. Now, the reason this happens is what it does is it reduces the stress and the cognitive load in our brain. Basically, the effort that we put into problem solving is reduced if we continue on familiar neuron paths. But for the ideation process to really work, each participant must be self-aware and open-minded to ideas so that they can create new neuron pathways. And they must be very open to different ideas that are going to create those new neuron pathways. And look at saying, okay, let's look at sparking some different ideas that are not your normal way of thinking. So there's some characteristics that we can look at adopting that you could potentially bring up if you're going to go through this ideation process with your team, that can be adopted, that can help these practices to spark new ideas, because that way we are really going to push our boundaries of our creating new neuron pathways. So these characteristics are, and I've got them listed here, I'm happy to send them to you if anybody wants them, is the first one is adapt. So we're saying to everyone, broaden your perspective and extend your thinking as new inputs get generated. So each time new ideas get generated, expand your thinking. So we're always adapting. So everyone's open and sitting there saying, we're open to adapting. The second one is connect. Learn to take two seemingly unrelated concepts and bring them together to create new possibilities. And I've mentioned that multiple times because it's so important to understand creativity doesn't come from one idea, it comes from many ideas. When we look at Uber, that was from 2 ideas. We look at Airbnb, multiple ideas. Talking about Uber, the third one is disrupt. That's the third character to embrace and to present the team with. Everyone has to disrupt, overturn the status quo of your industry to help rethink conventional approaches to problems. So we need to rethink what is the conventional approach and let's rethink it for this particular problem we're trying to ideate on. The next one is dream. Visualize a new kind of reality by turning abstract needs into pictures or stories, thereby allowing the room for full invention. So we're dreaming, we're allowing to dream, and we're positioning the group at the start that we are going to be open to dreaming and visualizing. And it might take, stories, pictures, whatever, just allow for that. The next one here is experiment. Embrace the character of experiment. Embrace curiosity enough to take risks and be eager to learn new information. So really embrace curiosity. What if we try this? What if this happens? What will happen here? The next one, identify patterns. Spot common threads of meaning in the world around us and in your world or your concept or your clients with the information that you've gained. Identify any patterns because these patterns will give us new information. The last one is be uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable, try something new often. The only way we're going to create new neuron pathways if we are uncomfortable, if we're pushing past our boundaries. So these characteristics I would recommend to present to a team at the beginning of the ideation process to say we would like everyone to embrace these characters as part of this process. So the first one, just to recap, was adapt. The second one, connect. The third one, disrupt. The fourth one, dream. Fifth, experiment. Identify patterns. And lastly, be uncomfortable. If we look at our brains and we look at our thinking and we look at relating it to muscles, if you're wanting to build muscles, you need to go in the gym and break them down first before they're going to build. And our creative thinking, our brain's the same. We need to make sure that we push past that painful place where we're like, oh, I can't think, and build these new neuron pathways to come up with new ideas. And we only get that by this ideation process. visualizing, brainstorming, sharing, connecting, dreaming, all of that. It all comes together. So the other thing that's worth remembering is find the worst idea possible. And this is fun. It's a method within the ideation process. It encourages team members to purposefully seek out the worst solution they can come up with. Now, this is a fabulous exercise where everyone's brain's hurting when they've just been through the really, really hard peak of their brain workout. It's meant to relax them. It boosts confidence. It really stokes creativity. And I've seen some amazing sparks coming from the fun and the sparks when people are saying, okay, let's think up the worst idea. You know, also searching for the downright awfulest ideas. It's also a way for people to loosen up, and it's to think less. It helps them to think less narrowly, and it also helps them to step over the line of looking silly, or that question that I said before about worried about asking silly questions. It just really shakes up the room, and it's a great exercise to just release everybody. So a lot of fun to do that. The other one here that I really want people to be mindful of, and this goes back to the, you know, the different types of personalities, the DISC, your dominant people, your influencer people. These are generally a lot faster paced. Then we've got the compliant and the steady people who are a lot slower paced. Don't forget about this. You know, often introverts, which are generally your compliant people and your steady people, don't overlook them. They can have some amazing ideas. But if you've got somebody who's an extrovert in the room that constantly dominates everything, they'll have amazing creative ideas that they're too nervous to bring up. So be sure that the facilitator is aware of who the introverts are and what their different personality biases are, so that we're not going to be having somebody who's potentially got some amazing ideas to contribute, but they haven't had a chance to contribute them because somebody has just been talking over them all the time. Everybody needs to be encouraged to participate, and everybody needs to feel comfortable. Even the introverts, they might just do it in a different way. So have this mindful at the start who they are, so that the facilitator can bring that into part of the process. So that's the ideation part of it. The last two phases, I'm not going to go into much detail, but they're part of that whole process, that design process. The fourth stage is the prototype. So getting to the prototype of whatever it is. It might be a process. It might be a new product here. It might be a new document, a new marketing plan, whatever it might be. That fourth stage is getting to the prototype. And then that last stage of these 5 stages is the testing phase. Make sure that whatever process or whatever product or whatever we've designed and come up with, make sure there is a test phase that is not just once at the start, that it continues, that we continue whatever it is to test and measure. Have we achieved what we set out to achieve? Have we solved what we set out to solve? So that there is some kind of testing and measuring regularly to check if it's still working and if it's still valid. So that's the 5 phases that we started off at the beginning, that I said I wanted to go through, with ideation being that third phase of the design process. So thank you very much. It's been, you know, a pleasure having everybody here today, and you know, I really hope that you understand that this is a very powerful tool that you could be using within your organisation, and it really it really can bring up some amazing hidden gems that are available to you in your business without too much difficulty. You just need to set it up, and you just need to get your team together and follow those processes that I've gone through. Identify, you know, who's this problem here who's our client, what's the problem that we're solving, what are some ideas of how we're going to solve it, and then what are we going to come up with to actually solve it, what have we designed here, and how are we going to test it. So it's really important that people look at running their business going forward with what's possible, rather than always looking behind at putting out bushfires, and planning for how good could you be, what is available for the future.